Hello, this was a little bit of a process. So I like to work in Sony Vegas a lot. I do a lot of video editing, and I'm recently starting in Hitfilm. I'm doing color grading. I'm doing quite a few things that are pretty fun. I'm upgrading some of my cameras. They're 4K and ProRes, and I want to get into editing raw footage. So my old AMD FX setup just wasn't cutting it anymore. So I built what I thought was the ultimate editing machine. You're looking at it now. I finished up a few seconds ago. I just want to run through it. So there's a lot of things that I learned doing this that were very difficult to figure out. So like I said, the machine is built primarily for Sony Vegas Pro and Hitfilm. I also use a few Boris plugins, and occasionally I play with DaVinci Resolve. So one of the biggest arguments is, do you go with Nvidia card that has CUDA? That's their programming, or their I don't know what you call it. That's their architecture for their boards, or an OpenGL, which is supported by everybody else. It's like an open protocol for GPUs. Now ATI only supports OpenGL. It does not do CUDA because Nvidia, that's an Nvidia thing. So I dug and researched a lot. Even a lot of people were concerned because Adobe seems to favor CUDA, they say, but that isn't necessarily the case. So how it breaks down is each FX or render FX inside of your editing software uses whatever it's built for. So let's say you're doing a starburst, or you're doing I do stabilization a lot, where you post stabilize footage, or you're maybe doing some color correcting, or whatever effects you're using. Use one or the other. Now, you have to look at each effect to see which one it uses. Sony Vegas, for the most part, uses OpenGL. When they render as well, certain media types like an MPEG-4 and H.264 or 265 or whatever you're rendering your final project to, that also uses one or the other. Now, when you render, it can use your CPU or the GPU. So at any rate, when we boil down to it, I lean towards the Radeon boards. They only support OpenGL. I felt CUDA wasn't that big a deal, and because I've always had amazing luck with the Radeon boards. So I got an MSI Radeon RX480 8GB. Why did I buy this one? It was actually a really good buy. It's low power compared to some of the other boards. It's the newest architecture they have. I was looking specifically for, in the board I bought, the amount of memory, the amount of stream processors, and compute units. The more, the better on those three, I felt. I wasn't really looking for clock speed or any of that. This is it right here. I also went with the overclock version, which the only thing I could tell is it's not overclocked, but it's more friendly to overclocking from what I understand, is this does not have a shroud all the way around the board. The next thing I looked at was the Intel i7. I actually had to return a Boswell processor. It looked like it was the better deal, but hey, you gotta look here. Haswell is the newest architecture from Intel, or the newest as of I know of as of doing this. It's lower power consumption, and the big thing we're looking at here is you get 40 lanes of full speed PCIe. Why is that important? I installed a PCIe, you can barely see it, M.2 SSD. It's on the motherboard there under the graphics card fan. And I also have a PCIe 3.0 graphics card, and I didn't want to go into some crazy switching thing that the Boswell setup does from Intel. I have come to hear that the Boswell architecture can crash, and the performance of it is really not very well known. It does some switching to throttle the bandwidth of the PCIe lanes, and I don't know. I'm not an expert on it, but the Haswell just keeps the lanes at full speed. So the Haswell is the better choice there. More cores, the better. I wasn't terribly concerned with the megahertz, the clock speed. I wanted to go with an 8-core setup, but it was well over $1,000 for this Haswell with an 8-core. So I stuck with the 5930K. The K stands for it is able to be overclocked. I didn't overclock anything. I don't have any plans to overclock anything. But someday when this thing's a junker, maybe I'll overclock it and get another year out of it or so. You definitely have to go with the A99 architecture or the chipset from Intel for your motherboard. The features I was looking for are Ultra M.2. That's for the PCIe SSD. You want PCIe actually 3.1 support. And this is the socket that this motherboard uses. It's a 2011 version 3 socket. Of course, you want a built-in gigabit LAN. And I wanted 128 gigs of memory on here, but I kind of goofed up and bought the wrong board. So I'm stuck with 64. You can do 128 gigs on here. But that's the short of it. I bought the ASRock A99M killer motherboard. It looked pretty sweet. I don't recommend it. Here's why. Their utilities were a pain. I couldn't even get their CD to install for the drivers on Windows 10. There's all kinds of memory issues, so I had to upgrade the BIOS. It was a pain in the butt to take the memory, and just it's a little rough around the edges. That said, it'll be a great motherboard. It's got a really good build to it, and it feels good, I guess, if that counts for anything. Everything looks really strong and sturdy in here. But if I had it to do over again, I would buy an A99 board with these features listed here. You can pause this. And then I'd also have a 4K capable graphics chipset right on the motherboard. Why is that? You want the one on the motherboard that will run your monitors. Then you have a second GPU in your first PCIe slot, and that is only selected in your video editing software. So you can get this GPU to run your renders and your FX and your timeline and all that, and it's not bogged down with the display at all. Pretty cool. So that's what I would do if I had it all to do over again. I bought 4 sticks of 16 gigabyte DDR4 memory. I didn't really care what speed it was. I got 2133 PC for 17,000. Specifically, it's the GSkill RipJaws. If I ripped off these covers for the heat protection and shielding, I think it's more for shielding. I'm sure the chipset would be the same as a lot of other memory cards. The cast latency is 1536, which is actually pretty high. It's not very fast. But again, I didn't really care so much about that. I know you can really get into memory and tear it apart and get all kinds of different specs on it. But I felt this would be more than good enough for video editing. I'm not really sure what the higher speed memory is for. My biggest concern was actually buying the exact same DIMMs, if you still call them that, for all the slots. And the reason is I want to ensure compatibility and timing on each one so that I don't have crashes in the video editing software because something saved in one DIMM and ran across to a page on the other one and the timing got all messed up. The next thing I got here is the Samsung 950 VNAND PCIe M.2 SSD. I got a 512 gigabyte. You could probably get away with a 256 or whatever number is around that. It is just for the operating system, so it'll boot real fast. I may actually make a little partition on there to make it so I can render to that from my scratch drives. I specifically went with the Samsung 950 because when I looked at benchmarks for speeds on the internet, it was the king of the hill. Nobody's knocked it off the hill yet. So this is the cat's meow when it comes to speed for a PCIe M.2 NVMe drive. These are some leftovers I used from my old computer. I got 7200 RPM 2 terabyte for capture scratch. Got another 256 gigabyte SSD. And I used the old 650 watt power supply unit. I think that will work fine. A lot of people are like, we just put in a really, really high wattage power supply and we don't want any crashes because of it. I don't think that's absolutely necessary. You maybe want some tolerance in there, an extra 50 watts or something above what you're using. But my goal is I love low power. I don't want this thing to be a toaster oven running in my studio here. So that, and I don't want to get a really expensive electric bill, which you can from these computers. I can notice them on my electric if I run them all the time. My goal here is I did say I wanted to build my ultimate machine, but I did compromise. I want to get a 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte SSD and pull these two out. I go all the way to the top. I got a liquid cooling setup. I wasn't really too concerned to have liquid cooling, but it wasn't much more expensive than a fan, which is amazing. So I got this Captain 240EX liquid cooler. It has this radiator here and 2 fans, which are extremely quiet. This is the liquid cooler itself. If I touch it, it's very cool. And it works fantastically well so far. This is another thing I love about this graphics card. When it's not running really hardcore, it even shuts the fans off. I might want to double check to make sure that's right. But that is awesome because I don't like all that noise in my studio. I actually have this in my studio, as you can see. It's really messy in here. I film in here. I do podcasts and everything. So the next thing that's up here is this case. This case, again, was like, and I talked to some other people that built video editing machines. They loved this case. The reason is it's one of the coolest temperature-wise cases you can buy. It's got vents, 360 degrees all the way around it. It's, if you flip it over, if you take this panel off, your SSDs can pull out really quick. They got these little quick release things. And your regular hard drives, actually it's this panel, the SSDs are there. Your hard drives are down there. Your power supply is there. So it keeps all that stuff on the bottom and all your extra cables on the bottom. So it's a nice clean setup. And temperature-wise, it's ideal. It did have 2 more of these fans, which I could put in. I pulled them out because I just don't like all that fan noise. If I need them, I will put them back in. My only complaint about this is it says it accepts a full-size graphics card, but the clearance over this power connector is kind of poor. So when I put this in, I had to bend and you can see it hits that, which is not too good of a thing, because I just think I turned, nope. Yeah, see, that wasn't cool. I bumped that, and my monitor reset, the graphics card reset or something. So not very cool. I wish that was a little more clearance. I might have to take a Dremel or something and cut that down so the wires hang lower or something. Oh, there is one other thing. So most of these screws are pretty good. But these on the top and bottom are not. These are real pain. They got some sort of spring in them, or something. I'm thinking I might take those off and just put a different screw on there. They aren't that great. But aside from that, this case, I would get it again. Actually, yeah, I would get that case again. I think it's quite great. So what else did I do here? I went with Windows 10 Pro. I got the top one below the server version. You don't need the server version. The reason is I want to make sure that I had every feature I needed for performance in the operating system. It's really hard to get a spec list from Microsoft that tells you all the things they leave in and take out. One thing is, I guess Windows 10 Pro supports up to 2 terabytes of memory, whereas Windows 10 Home only supports 128 gigs. Now, that's less than I have. That's more than I have here. But that's just one thing, and you're not going to find that very easily in their marketing. There may be a bunch of other things that they took out of Windows 10 Home that could affect your editing, and I have no idea what they are. But just to be safe, I went with Windows 10 Pro. What else do I have to say here? Oh, just a few other little notes. I do not have a really awesome color grading monitor that's all professionally calibrated and stuff. There are some menus that you're definitely going to want to go through in Windows that allow you to calibrate the brightness and contrast on your display. And I saw something in there also for colors, which is pretty cool. I've never seen that before. I got to play with that. That said, I went the really cheap route. This is a Seiki, S-E-I-K-I. It was very inexpensive. It was like $200 or $300. 4K TV, and it's 39 inches. It is so awesome to work with. I did not skimp on my keyboard and mouse. This is horribly dirty. I'm working here all the time. This is a Microsoft Sculpt setup. I highly recommend buying it. I think I spent a lot of money on this, but it's worth every cent. It's really, really comfortable, and I never get sore wrists or anything like that. This is a really old Bamboo, but I also do a lot of work in Photoshop. You definitely want one of these for your editing and design computer. And that's the remote for the TV. Yeah, this is a really old Bamboo. And from what I understand, you don't want to get the large Bamboo tablet. You want to get the medium or the small one. The reason is the large one, you have to go all over the place to draw instead of just right in the little spot. So, one little spot. Let's see if there's anything else that I didn't hit here. So I have a Microsoft Ergo Sculpt keyboard setup, a Wacom, I can never say it right, Bamboo tablet. These things are awesome. I just use a 4K TV for my monitor and calibrate it through the Windows 10. That's not ideal for color grading and all that, but it works. I got a Captain 240EX liquid cooler from DeepCool, a Corsair Carbide series Air 240 case, that's that jobby there. MSI Radeon RX480, 8 gigabytes graphics card, an Intel i7 5930K 6-core processor, an ASRock A99M. I recommend picking another motherboard. I wasn't too happy with this. It'll work, but one that will do up to 128 gigs and has these features: Ultra M.2, PCIe, PCIe 3.0, definitely at least two of those, USB 3.1, and you need the socket 2011 version 3. It has to be the A99 chipset from Intel. I would also get a integrated graphics on that. For your display. You're going to want to get the same memory modules and install them, the exact same ones, to ensure you have no timing problems or crashes or faults when you're editing. You want to go with a Samsung PCIe SSD. You could get a 256 if you want. And then like a 1 or a 2 terabyte SSD drive for your capture scratch. What else was I going to say? That's about it. I love Radeon. I've had really great luck with it. I wouldn't be too concerned about CUDA and all that. If you are really concerned, figure out what specific effects in Premiere and After Effects, if you're an Adobe person, uses CUDA, and which render types use CUDA. But a lot of them still use OpenGL. So from what I understand, you'll want to research that a little further. But that's my build. I'm going to put some links below the description if you'd like to check any of these things out or maybe build the same PC as I built here. Thanks a lot for watching. That was a really long video, but it's 20 minutes. But I spent weeks, actually over a month, even longer than that, asking questions on what to buy, and it wasn't straightforward. I even bought some of the wrong stuff and had to return it. So thanks a lot for watching, and like I said, there's links in the description where you can get some of this stuff or research a little further on your own. And if you have any questions, by all means, write me a note below and I'll answer them for you.